Welcome to our last unit in our journey into and through Celtic theology. In this, I'm going to again back off from doing a full lecture as I looked at the material and as I considered the different ways to reflect on it. I kept coming back to more of a practice, an exercise. And I'm hoping that you will take the time that you would normally take watching, reading, listening, reflecting on the lecture, and to do this task. And this comes out of my own experience with something similar that was such a time of refreshment in a challenging season for me. And I'll talk about that after I go through the description of the exercise. In this exercise, I invite you to spend an hour this week walking around wherever that is. It could be something that you wrote about, or it could be something where if you're traveling or somewhere where it's not your permanent place, that's okay. The goal here isn't to be necessarily specific in the place where you're ministering or the place where you feel called, but to be in this place with an attitude of praise. So as you spend this hour this week walking around, and I want to add, if walking is hard or if there's some other problem with that, don't feel like I'm saying you have to be locked into that specific way. I encourage walking or moving around the sidewalks or the neighborhood as you're able. But if that's just not possible, find a central place to sit in your context, or drive around the neighborhood and do this task, or something that just fits what you are and able to do, because I want this to be a time of reorientation and refreshment, not another burden. I want this to be a break in the midst of what I know is a busy week for everyone. And as you walk or move around or sit, notice. We talked about the discipline of noticing earlier. All throughout the readings, we've seen how noticing sparks prayers and laments and so many other reflections. So as you move around, notice the specifics. Notice a branch, notice a bird, notice a grass, notice the side of a building, notice things that you might overlook, and be present as you journey in a very specific way. Notice those things that our brain usually locks out, and be in this place in a way that maybe you haven't before, even if you've been there a while. As you notice, praise God. If it's appropriate, praise God for what you're noticing. If it's a challenge, praise God for his victory. But at every step, at every moment, I want you to praise God, to notice and to offer praise to God for what you're noticing in this context. Don't get caught up in the negatives or needs or issues. It's very easy and even right and good to pray for and to contend for and wrestle with the spiritual realities and to get caught in our own journeys. And I know that when I go walking, that's something that's very, very natural for me to just start praying about all the things I need to pray about. It leads me into prayer. But for this, I want you to praise. I want you to back off feeling like you need to have to do something for, and instead be with God and notice God in this and praise God. So for an hour, notice and praise God as you journey around or as you look around. That's it. And I'm going to be doing this as well. This is an invitation to you, but also yet another way in which this isn't just a course I'm teaching, but a course that's part of my own journey of renewal during this season. And as part of that, what I'm committing to myself, and I invite you to, is to do this every single day this week. So beginning on the first day and on the seventh day, finishing every day, do this if you can. Again, that's an invitation. I'm not saying this has to be equal to a 7-hour lecture. So if nothing else, do this for 1 hour this week, and that counts as the lecture. The lecture is you experiencing, enacting, and expressing praise in your context. And that taps into, I think, what the discussions this week are really orienting us toward. If you're able, I also encourage you, for if you just do it once or just one time, if you do it throughout the week, to take pictures as you walk. Use your phone, or if you have another camera, that's fine. But take pictures of what you notice, and as you notice, and as you praise. If you see something that's invoking a praise, take a picture of it. If you see something interesting, take a picture of it. Just let the images be a record of your noticing. Make a kind of visual praise journal then with these pictures in a gallery or in a video. You don't have to have a lot of skills. Computers often will do this automatically, but even at the very least, have them in a folder that you can cycle through. Take pictures. Praise repeatedly over things that you see. So make this a journey of constant praise and a visual journal of what you see. This week is also about proclamation, and I encourage you to talk to someone about your experiences doing this. Praise walk or praise noticing. And maybe I also encourage you to talk to someone about what God's been doing in your life this summer. Testimony. Not a testimony of this is how Jesus saved me in a big way, but sharing this part of your learning with someone and just inviting them into this learning and inviting them into the story that God is working in you and through you in your context. As I said, I'll share a little bit about what inspired some of this, and this is certainly not a new task. This is something that people have done a long time, but I want to share a very personal experience for me that has to do with my teaching at Fuller Seminary. I think it was 2017. Fuller had finally closed the Sacramento campus, which was a hard ache for me. I had cleaned out the office that I loved. It was within walking distance of my house through a park, and there was just so much excitement and opportunity in moving up there from Southern California when we did, and then they announced they closed it, and I will admit it was a couple years of anguish because there was so much good that I was seeing in this community and so much opportunity that I felt got shortchanged and cut off just as we were starting to get going. And the people there were just so amazing. And the diversity of that neighborhood was both surprising and created such an opportunity. I can go on and on and on about this. But they closed it. And as part of my continuing role in teaching, even though I didn't have my own campus to teach at anymore, I was being asked to teach at the other regional campuses, most of which were likewise now being in the process of being shut down. And so I was doing what I called the farewell tour, the shutdown tour, where I would be teaching in these campuses as they closed as well. And it was both a wonderful opportunity because of the people in these different communities in the Bay Area, in Seattle, and Colorado Springs, and there was such an opportunity in these local places where the learning happened within the context, which is so much like the kinds of monastic communities that we have talked about. And I was really sad and had to go teach a class on worship. I think it was worship. And the IS class, and I taught in the afternoons and someone else taught in the morning, and I was feeling really discouraged. I was feeling like God had sort of led me down a path, and we had moved away from our family, and then my role was to handle all the emotions and carry the burden of what Fuller had done to the students in closing it down. And I just felt very sad and frustrated and depressed. And I woke up on a Wednesday morning at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park. And I was staying on the campus, and they have some housing for the seminarians there who are learning to be Catholic priests. And they had housing that they let Fuller use, and a space that they let Fuller use. And I woke up just feeling angry and just not very at peace with God. I was missing a lot of shalom. And I got up, and it's a beautiful campus, and it's this wonderful space in the midst of a very technology, very wealthy area, but it's like this big campus with, just feels like you're in an old part of isolated California. And I started walking around, and I did what I am inviting you to do. I just started taking pictures. I didn't have praise at first, but I did have prayer. And I just took pictures of what I saw. And as I took pictures, I was realizing that God was leading me into this journey, this temporary journey of rediscovery, of noticing the trees and the architecture and the birds and the animals. And just as I did so, the prayers were coming out. And as I got back to back to the middle of the campus after walking around a wooded area and just walking around some undeveloped parts, I got back to the middle, and there was this statue of St. Patrick. And I took a picture of that and considered his story, his journey, and how God had worked through the hardships. And as I continued to find my way winding around the campus, I just felt drawn back to the classroom where I'd be teaching that afternoon. And while there was a class in session, I took a picture. I had been taking pictures this whole time, and I took a picture of the classroom and the students inside just from the window. I don't think they saw me. But what occurred to me in this whole process was journeying from anger and frustration to praise, was realizing that those students, even though that we were losing the campus and my campus is closed, what I felt called to do was teach and to minister. And it wasn't about these specific places, but God was continuing to do a work. And as there's been this kind of pilgrimage and journey and travel and travail, I've seen God continue to do this work. And now that I'm back in this mountainy forest that I'm in, I see God's continued work, even as there's so much continuing to be unsettled. And a lot of my roles aren't things I say, oh, this is really fun. I don't really like administrative work very much, which is part of my staff job. Yet I see the value of God moving me through this process and into these roles. And even if it doesn't have the wonderful security of a full-time academic job with all the privileges and ability to write and research, I see God's work in this, and I praise. I can go outside and I praise. As part of my afternoon task then, I moved away from the typical lecture. They'd been able to watch it throughout the course of the quarter, so I thought I could do this. And I just walked them through this process. I just did a slideshow and just talked about it. And then I was joking, I was funny. A lot of students didn't know what I was doing because it just seemed very weird. And I was just talking to the pictures that I had taken. And then at the end, I shared about this journey and experience, and they saw how it was coming together, not in a here's what you need to think about praise or renewal, but as a journey of my emotional, actually, engagement with the process, invited them into that story, my story, but also their story. And that was a very Celtic way about talking, about praise and proclamation. So I invite you into that too. And as I said, I'm going to be doing that this week, and I'll post in the forum this week as well. So thank you. Thank you for being not only engaged in this class, but inspirations to me, reminders to me, encouragements to me. And yes, I praise God for each of you, because I celebrate how God's working in and through you. May the Father, may the Son, may the Spirit be with us as we continue this journey on.